Hi, this is Jen Rubin, editor-in-chief of The Contrarian. If it's Monday, it must be time for Pablo Torre. Pablo, welcome.
Are we starting with Jeffrey Epstein? Are we starting with FIFA? Wimbledon. There are a zillion things we could be doing here,
There
Jen.
are, there are. Let's start with FIFA because this was such a Trumpian moment. We're referring, of course, to the finals of the World Cup Club Champions, which was this kind of made up thing. And
Correct.
actually, some of the matches turned out to be pretty good. Chelsea won really a surprising, stunning performance against PSG, which was heavily favored, having won Champions League. But the funniest part of this, of course, was the awards ceremony. Donald Trump comes down, fine, he gives them the awards, but then he won't get off the stage, Pablo. I thought the Chelsea people's expression on their faces were like, what the F? Who is this guy? We're priceless.
Oh, it's so good. I mean, look, I think it's possible that Chelsea was unaware of what I've been aware of, which is that FIFA, Gianni Infantino, the head of FIFA, has been selling the Club World Cup to Donald Trump personally for
Yes.
months now. So there was this press conference many moons ago, Jen, in which they brought FIFA, Gianni Infantino brought that trophy, that very same trophy finally awarded to Chelsea, to the White House. And it spun and it was gleaming and golden. And FIFA was saying, you can have it. And we're gonna give it at the thing, but then it comes back to you and we'll get it's just this whole thing that was clearly the whole invention. It is invention of here is this thing that never existed before, but it'll be a year before the real World Cup in North America so that America can get, I don't know, most generously a preview of something like high level soccer. More realistically, I think can get into business with the Trump administration as soon as possible and drain
Yeah.
some extra, business development out of that. It felt, as always, like sports was secondary to the actual game that was encompassing
Yes.
this. And that is why, if you're wondering, why was Donald Trump refusing to leave the stage beyond his general, sort of pathological need to be on stage? It was because I'm sure in his head, this is his thing. It's his thing also, which is the story of this whole time we're living in.
Exactly. And it reminded me of all of these tin pot dictators who have been on the take from FIFA for years because they get backdoor deals, they get development money, which kind of goes into the pockets of connected, wealthy people in these countries that are poor and are in dire need of any kind of revenue that they can get. But Trump is the quintessential tin pot dictator now. It just happens that he's in charge of a first world country, at least we're first world for now. So the whole thing looked so creepy and somewhat funny. I mean, it does make me sad that Saturday Night Live is on hiatus because you couldn't make this up.
No, the sketches are just, I mean, as always, perhaps, but more than ever, it feels like the sketches are writing themselves. Trump standing there, basking in the refracted glow of this trophy being
Yes.
awarded to a team that, by the way, like everyone else in soccer, had no idea what this even was
Yes.
until recently. Like the whole
Yes.
thing of this being a to now mix all of the sort of geopolitical metaphors here, this whole tournament being a Potemkin event, right?
Yes.
It just felt like a stand-up thing with not a lot behind it. Some of the rounds earlier were embarrassingly
Yes.
underattended. The whole thing is sort of largely irrelevant because it means nothing except for the trophy and except for Trump being there
Right.
in front of, Tom Brady in a luxury suite and lots of geopolitical figures there to the
Exactly.
glad hand and
Exactly.
profit.
Exactly. All of them stuffed into that little box, the collective of IQ of which was probably, room temperature, but we'll put that aside. So let's talk Jeffrey Epstein. It's not
Please.
sports, but it certainly is on the minds of a lot of people. And I gotta say, at the beginning, like a lot of people, I thought this was kind of a joke and ha ha ha, come up and the right wing has gotten hoisted on their own petard. But there's some really serious elements in this, not the least of which is that no one's really paid a price other than Jeffrey Epstein and his sidekick, who's in prison, for the exploitation of young girls. And no one until now has really been all that concerned about it.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start because there is the dark HBO comedy of how now the hypocrisy has been laid bare in ways that are just like so deeply undeniable that it feels almost different at risk of
Yes,
being naive. I say that at risk of being naive, but I'll get to that. The thing you're starting with is kind of the whole premise of why this had juice and helped build
right,
Trump's coalition, his base, beyond merely conventional MAGA, let's call it, in the first place. There
right,
were people who were legitimately sold this idea, which may be rooted actually in legal fact, that there was effectively a human trafficking, abuse of underage girls, criminal operation that was international and centered around this guy, Jeffrey Epstein, who had connections to people on both sides of the aisle, by the way, right? Lots of celebrities, academics, on and on and on. Now,
royalty, Prince
royalty,
Andrew.
Prince Andrew, of course, of course. I mean, look, just extensive the list of names that have popped up already. And
Right.
so the sort of implausibility that actually nothing to see here, which is truly, by the way, the message that Trump sent on Truth Social, which I will just observe for you here, JD Vance has not posted on Twitter or his own accounts, which is just very interesting to me, right? Like, when are people realizing, ooh, okay, that one, no thanks. Um,
Right.
part of this, part of why this is feeling different to me is that I I saw how this whole Jeffrey Epstein story was sold and frankly spread through the podcast manosphere. What does this really mean? It means a bunch of dudes who otherwise aren't that political, but love a good conspiracy theory and also love to distrust authority. And so this is Joe Rogan, this is every comedian, this is Andrew Schultz, this is go down the list, right? By the way, this list also included, perhaps not coincidentally, the people who are literally key players in the story, Dan
Yes.
Bongino and Kash Patel,
Right.
podcasters, as well as now the deputy and actual director of the FBI, respectively, who, by the way, at that big new media event at the White House, right? Again, for the internet people, there were those binders, the Pam Bondi, dog and pony show about here are the files, phase one, here it is, only for none of it to materialize, causing everybody who bought into this, who contributed to the word cloud on podcasts, Jed, when it came to dudes who were like, you know what, this Trump guy is really going to disrupt the deep state, the powers that be. Jeffrey Epstein was the 1,000-point font. Those were the words in the word cloud. And so you can't run from that now, but that's exactly what Trump is doing.
And what they are trying to concoct is this notion that it's still the deep state, that somehow these documents were forged by Obama and Biden. I mean, it really, their conspiracy mongering has fallen apart because at the root of this is a real concern about not only the circumstances of his death, you can believe that or not. There's
Sure.
perhaps unknowable explanations for how it was that he was able to commit suicide apparently inside a US prison. But more importantly, about Trump and other people's role in it. And what was so funny is that the Trump people who were spreading this never kind of put two and two together to say, but our guy was part of this. Should
It's
we be
amazing.
raising this? It was like the worlds never crossed because they were not empowered. And this is the difference between running a podcast and running the FBI.
It's
You are
such
charge.
it's such a
And
good point. Yeah.
that's why this whole thing has kind of come crashing down. Seeing that post, it was the first time I've ever seen Trump truly panicked. And he wasn't this panicked when he was on trial because he never thought, perhaps correctly, that he was ever going to pay any penalty. But this just reeked of panic. And he can't really throw these people to the wolves because everyone knows Pam Bondi does not think for herself. She is a, stooge, an instrument of Trump. So they're now caught. And Democrats, for once, guys and gals, if you were smart, and I think they're waking up to this, every time there's a hearing, you should ask about this. Every time there's a nominee, you ask about this. You pass resolutions to require that this become public, because underneath this all, there is a serious issue. But I gotta say, big picture, this is what happens to crackpot autocrats who thrive on lies and conspiracies. Eventually, it comes back to haunt them because they've taught people not to believe in anything. So whether they're telling the truth or not, it becomes one of those kind of weird games. How do you tell when the lying liar is lying? And so now they're trapped. What is the kind of podcast, the manosphere out there reacting to that now? Do they feel betrayed?
It's unprecedented. Yes,
Yeah.
they are saying all of the things that I think logically, one, if you were a Democratic operative, would have dreamed to hear them say pre-election. They're saying now, and part of it, a big part of it, is as you say, because the bluff got called. He is now in control of the same apparatus, and he is seemingly doing exactly what he was criticizing, and frankly, what his surrogates more than anything were sort of selling on his behalf, as if they, to your point, had this active blindness as to the idea that that guy, their guy, Donald Trump, has always been identified as one of Jeffrey Epstein's closest associates, is in photos and all sorts of other articles and interviews. And it's just it always amused me, darkly amused me as always, when I would see Trump be a guest on these quote unquote just like manosphere pods, which is just like, again, non-political dudes who love conspiracies who became Trump guys, which is a not insignificant demographic, right? It's the thing that the Dems are chasing still today. So when they would interview Trump, they just never asked about it. And I always found that the most like, I'm like, and again, most generously, they're bad interviewers. Least generously, they were told to not ask about it. And maybe now they are just forced to confront it because there is no ambiguity. That statement, the Truth Social statement, and it was classic Trump in various ways, capital letters, overstatement to the point of incredulity, all of that. But it also definitely had a panic that smelled to, I think, the largest possible coalition to date of just indefensible bullshit. And at that point, even as we've talked about Elon's fallout with Trump and insert your favorite, ooh, I think they got him here, the actual convictions and all of the legal system stuff. This one, to your point, if the Dems know anything about politics, they turn this into their issue. And I hope that they do.
And, I sort of feel sorry, as I often do, for the Democrats. They've been talking about tariffs, democracy, the economy. Had they been talking about Jeffrey Epstein, they might have gotten further, but be that as it may.
Yes.
I want to move on to another scandal. And this one you have had quite the role in uncovering. When last we talked about this, you had revealed a document, which was essentially the decision of a arbitrator in kind of figuring out this conspiracy that the owners of the NFL had to suppress contracts for their top players, the guaranteed contracts. Since that came out and everyone is kind of pointing their finger, we learned some interesting information about the Players Association. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so this is where I am glad that someone has taken the roadmap that we laid out in our reporting.
Yes.
Pablo.show, our Substack, has the PDF, has the roadmap there for those who haven't seen it yet. 61-page arbitration ruling that had been suppressed, we reported. Don Van Natta, who's one of the greatest investigative journalists ever, who now works for ESPN, took the ball and he followed up and reported that, in fact, the reason it was suppressed, was because of a confidentiality agreement between the union and the league, which, for those who's not familiar with labor versus management, really doesn't happen ever, particularly in the NFL. the union and the league, this premise of antagonism being buried under the weight of a legal agreement. So, of course, the question that I posed, asked, and answered in my episode was why. But now, the second data point, which I find fascinating in the ESPN reporting that Don Van Natta and Kaylin Kaler did, was they reported a development this past week, which is that the NFLPA, after agreeing to suppress this via confidentiality agreement, did the thing that I thought they should have done from the outset, which is a core tenet of the episode, which is that they should have used it and pursued the NFL in court, made a public show of it. The owners were found to have attempted in a coordinated effort to suppress guaranteed salaries, as you say, with their billionaire owners, the league office, and those owners. And now the NFLPA has said, actually, we're going to appeal this. We're going to appeal the ruling. And at that point, it's just like, what the bleep are you guys even trying at this point? Because you have now, because I released that document, the NFLPA has been boxed into this corner in which they're either the organization that didn't do anything about it, or they're the one that does it literally 15 days after I released the document, after burying it by NDA for 6 months, and they chose option B. And so we continue to report. This story is by no means over. This calls into question, of course, leadership on all sides. The union now, particularly in the spotlight. But it's a remarkable, remarkable development that I think has signaled to everybody that the water in this story is warm. If you're a journalist who is interested in something resembling the truth, this should be of great interest to you.
Learned that the union has a little bit of a conflict of interest problem because being an executive of Carlyle, which is seeking a minority interest, would be the classic conflict of interest. Explain that one to us.
So this is the third new nugget, which I loved to read about, of course. I had heard it, had not been able to nail it down in the way that ESPN had. So shout out to them. But what is true is that Lloyd Howell, the executive director of the union, the man in charge of all of this, right? Whose decision is any of this? It is ostensibly Lloyd Howell's. He also has a side gig. He works for the Carlyle Group, which is of course, financial institution that also is involved via a recent development with the NFL in the ability to acquire stakes, private equity stakes in NFL teams, meaning that the head of the union is also able, through his other job, to be directly linked to the side of the NFL and ownership, which is just, again, it's just classically insane.
It's unbelievable. You wonder like which side of the table would he sit on, or would he like hop back and forth in negotiations between the owner side and the union side? And what's amazing is that this has come out and he said, "Oh, I think I need to resign from Carlisle." Really? Really? Is that going to hold up?
What happens from here is where my attention has been trained, right? So I'm currently
Yeah.
reporting the sequel, TBD, but a lot of it is like what is supposed to happen just by any objective measure, and then what is happening and why. And so the union, as we are taping this, they have just recently released a statement that says, we're not changing anything. Reports of Lloyd Howell's demise, in other words, have been greatly exaggerated. We have a process. We're going to investigate this, blah, 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 blah. The question of when and how will change come and who will be forced to leave, because this has been, as we said in the original episode, a clear breach of fiduciary duty, right? You're a union. Like the whole premise of Lloyd Howell's regime was, I'm going to be different. I'm not going to be adversarial. I'm going to be corporate cooperator guy. That was kind of like the whole pitch of him. And that has been taken to a caricature degree of let's call it dystopian fulfillment. Like it's just remarkable.
Right. And you know, going back to my days as a labor lawyer, there's this thing called the duty of fair representation, meaning the union has an obligation if the merits of a case are not entirely, clear on the player side, to take that up. That's their role. But now we have a duty of no representation or crooked representation. It's really one of the most corrupt things I have ever seen in a union that would put a Jimmy Hoffa to shame, or any of the great union scandals in industrial America.
As a labor lawyer, Jen, who is into this stuff, it is great to hear you articulate it like that. Because I feel in sports like I'm taking crazy pills. Because I'm like, this is involving the most powerful people, the most powerful sport in America, right?
Yes.
And the fact that it's not the thing that everyone talks about and covers because of financial relationships with the NFL, because their sources are going to look bad, all the standard reasons why you don't tell the truth while claiming to be a quote unquote journalist, right? Standard stuff. On top of that, I'm just like, this feels like an inevitable story in some regard. Like, if there is any gravity to the rule of law, this goes a certain way. And so, why people aren't saying it clearly, what is just so obvious. Yes, I love, by the way, that sports occasionally gets to be the place where America is forced to confront labor versus management.
Reality, fiduciary duty, betrayal, financial exploitation. Yes,
It's just
exactly.
unions are so essential to how the sports sausage gets made. And
Yes,
and we can see it in every way. And in this case, I'm like, guys, this isn't like, again, I always say it's not just vegetables, it's also, we're gonna melt some cheese on your broccoli. This is juicy. This is famous people in
yes,
expedited discovery. It's suppressed documents, it's scandal, it's calls for resignation. I'm like, this is a movie.
yeah,
And
it is.
thank you for seeing it, because I don't think you are the default when it comes to how people in sports talk about this. And it drives me
Oh,
crazy.
right. Well, I think you more than anyone else has gotten the ball rolling on that score. But I want to end on a magnificent sports story, and that was Wimbledon. Folks know my favorite sporting event. It was a gorgeous tournament. There were upsets galore, there were underdogs. But in the end, you had two finals which showed character. And this is what I love about sports. The women's final, Iga Swiatek beat the American Amanda uh, and Asimova,
Yes.
and not just beat her, but humiliated her. 6-love, 6-love. But in tennis, you don't get to run away. You get up there after the match, you give the most gracious, congratulatory speech to the victor. The victor comes out and salutes you. The crowd, understanding that this poor girl has suffered like a humiliating loss after making it all the way to the finals, gives her a roaring round of applause. It was grace under pressure. Is that like everything that sports can teach us?
It was the opposite of the Trump thing at the FIFA
Yeah,
Club World Cup, right? So,
exactly.
something that I do not diminish is how difficult it is for an athlete who has just been
Oh,
humiliated to take questions. And
oh, I know.
tennis does it in a way that is so unsparing.
Yes,
If you don't have character,
yes.
you're asked to answer questions in front of everybody right there
Just
on the playing
lost.
surface.
Yes.
And so for for there to be the women's final, right? For there to be the first final since 1911, I believe, for there not to be a game won by the losing opponent. Um, it's getting skunked to the nth degree, right? And yet there is grace in defeat. Likewise, on the men's side, Alcaraz and Sinner, by the way, and I love Alcaraz. He's as impressive an athlete as I've ever seen in tennis.
Yes.
But Sinner, I was rooting for just because I want there to be an actual rivalry. And
Yes.
this
Yes.
was the inauguration of a rivalry. You got to win. You got to beat the other guy in a heavyweight title sort of setting to claim Wimbledon, no less, and actually inaugurate this rivalry. So that happened. And afterwards, look, I love good old fashioned blood feuds. But we're living, Jen, as the rest of this conversation has intimated, we're living at a time when there is no grace in defeat, when there is a paucity of character, when there is a longing for someone to show actually taking an L is something that we all need to figure out how to deal with.
Right.
And there was Sinner and Alcaraz in their early to mid 20s already displaying this veteran awareness of
Yes,
how to behave gracefully in victory and
exactly.
defeat. And it was
Exactly.
awesome. It was great.
And when you consider also the character it took for Sinner, who lost a heartbreaking French Open
Yep.
just weeks ago, who had multiple match points, multiple break points, it slipped through his fingers. It was as painful a loss as it could have been. And what he said was, when you lose, you have to learn from it. I had to go back and figure out why I lost. That's what champions do. You got to figure it out. But to do that and to say, I've got to fix my own game and not only emotionally recover from that, but move that to a different service where the guy across the net has won two in a row and bring myself to a place where I can win. It was an extraordinary mental, emotional, psychological effort by an athlete who sometimes is written off as robotic, as stiff, as, kind of some kind of machine. But that was hard. That was hard. And so you wound up loving both these guys, and you hope
Yeah.
that this rivalry goes on for as long as the Djokovic Nadal and Federer Nadal, rivalry went on. And I will just end on this. There is a little bit of sadness in that Djokovic now is so easily and routinely beaten by both these guys. He
Mm.
may be better still than the rest of the field, which is kind of amazing. He's 38 years
Oh,
old,
yeah.
my God. But these guys are now at such a high level. He's, the third wheel. And so he gets beaten in straight sets again. But again, gracious, acknowledging the new guys. And gosh, if we could all be the Sinners and the, Alcarazes and all of them, and not the Donald Trumps. God, wouldn't that be a country you'd want to live in? My gosh.
Yeah, the last brief thought I have is it's so nice, especially given this larger context, to be able to see young people
Yes,
seemingly be all right. Like they seem to know how to do this. There's a generational question always. Like the
yes,
previous greatest generation has evacuated, right? That's the story of tennis. You had three people carrying the sport for so long. And already, like at a microwave level of speed, you have these guys who seemingly are going to be able to carry this sport, this institution going forward. And that is all we can ask for in sports, in America, in democracy, is just the kids having, unfortunately, necessary responsibility to teach
yes,
the older people sometimes how it's done. And
absolutely.
and I am optimistic to see it happen, even if it's just in this narrow way in tennis.
And once again, Pablo, we have the best and the worst of us in sports. We have the grossest display of corruption possible, the grossest display of ego, and the glorious magnificence of courage, grace, empathy, and really humility as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, talk about sports having it all. It really was this week. We'll look forward to the next time. I'm sure, the story goes on, and now we move to the hard court season. Coming to Washington, D.C. in a couple weeks will be the Washington tournament. So I'll be out there looking at my favorite players there.
Yes, yes. The
Yes,
hardcore season, again, I won't take the pun, but yes, I expect in all surfaces, legal as well as sporting.
Exactly.
Might be a bit hard in
Yes,
court, hopefully, going forward. Yeah.
absolutely. Thanks so much, Pablo. We'll see you next week.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
See you then.